Hey guys, it's Siobhan with ToKittyandBeyond. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing another episode in the Starseed Origins series, and this is for Arcturians. So this is the Arcturian Starseed soul group, some of the traits, characteristics, and origin of this soul group. Arcturians are actually fairly common in my experience. Here on Earth, there does seem to be a large proportion of them. I've worked with many Arcturians over the years, and they all have slightly different frequencies, slightly different dimensional consciousness, but all of them tend to have very similar sort of traits and properties and characteristics, both at soul level and within their physical human incarnation expressions. So first things, Arcturians come from the star Arcturus, or the constellation Arcturus, which is a red giant. And so they are these sort of multidimensional or higher dimensional physical beings. They do still have physical bodies to some extent, but they are on a sort of a higher frequency of vibrational existence. Their physical bodies are less dense from what I'm able to perceive working with them at soul level. They tend to be portrayed as sort of bluish skin, large heads, big eyes. That's how I've seen them at soul level. That's how I've seen them depicted artistically by others who have experienced them as well. So that does seem to be sort of a correlation there. I do believe that there are different variations of Arcturians and different species within the overall soul group. So always take these things with a grain of salt and kind of go with what feels right for you. But Arcturians, they tend to be very drawn to the realms of spiritual enlightenment, spiritual growth, spiritual healing. They're also really good at learning new tools and applying that in a spiritual context. I've worked with many Arcturians who are also very logical minded and who like to engineer things or work with practical expressions of spirituality. So it's kind of like a soul level engineer rather than just, being all kind of like woo-woo into the spiritual side, because there's different polarities that you can interact with spirituality through. So Arcturians tend to be slightly more linear, logical. I've also seen many Arcturians present with a more masculine polarity within their soul. That doesn't mean that they don't have that feminine quality. Many of them do. There just seems to be a higher proportion, even within a female incarnation here on Earth, that they do tend to have a sort of more masculine expression at soul level. So again, this kind of relates to the linear, the logical, the scientific minded, but in a way that allows them to work with spirituality in a very advanced way. So Arcturians as humans tend to be conscious influencers that uphold spiritual wisdom. So like I said, at soul level, they are all about spiritual wisdom, spiritual tools, spiritual implementation, metaphysics, science in effect as a way to explain spirituality or to work with spirituality at a higher or more practical level, depending on how you look at it. Arcturians have a great deal of insight, and this is insight that can greatly benefit the world. That's why they've come here, not only to experience what it's like to be human, but also to share their insight, their wisdom that they have. Now, that being said, most Arcturians tend to be very quiet individuals. They don't necessarily aspire to be famous or well known. They don't really like to be the one out on stage. They don't necessarily like to be the one who is there speaking in front of a group of people about spiritual wisdom or techniques or tools. Now, that's not always the case. I have worked with a few Arcturians who actually do really well as spiritual influencers physically in the creative, social media community. So yeah, it can be really anything, and there's so many different variations, and there's no way that's wrong or right to do it. If you're Arcturian and you feel called to express yourself on a large scale, you can most certainly do that. There's no limitations other than the limitations we set for ourselves. But on a more large scale, Arcturians do tend to kind of be drawn to the quieter expressions of sharing their insight and wisdom. They're often drawn to the realms of metaphysics and spirituality, like I was saying, because it gives them tools to be able to work with information, knowledge, consciousness, energy at this really high level that allows them to express their innate spiritual wisdom. The thing with Arcturians is they don't always understand or accept the social structures that they live or work within here on Earth because they just don't make sense to them. And that's simply because they come from a soul group, a planet, a consciousness level that is so vastly different. And the way that certain systems and structures operate there is more based on what the needs are at a spiritual level, where here on Earth, it's more focused on what the needs are at a physical level, which oftentimes can kind of conflict with spiritual needs. Now, that's not always the case, and there is a large shift now taking place where we're getting into a more aligned expression of society from the inside out, making those changes. And Arcturians are one of the ground crew members of this change. They tend to incarnate into roles where they can shift things from the inside out, similar to Sirians. But the thing is that Sirians are more likely to adopt physical structures and systems and methodologies as their own, and then shift them slightly by improving them creatively from the inside out, whereas Arcturians can come in with the intention to kind of do the same thing, but they resist the social structures like government, politics, corporate, money, anything, or beliefs or ideologies, religions, that they come in to share spiritual insight and wisdom with. And so they end up kind of on the outskirts trying to sort of change things from the outside, which doesn't necessarily work as well. It totally can work. There's nothing wrong with that. But some of the dysfunctional expressions of this soul group can bridge into reclusivity and not connecting or participating in those social structures, even sometimes rebelling against them quietly or openly. So that's kind of something to keep in mind if you do resonate as an Arcturian soul. It's important for you to find that balance for yourself as to how you can both advocate for change within the social structures that don't make spiritual sense to you or aren't spiritually sound, advocating for reform of some kind, while at the same time not rejecting that structure entirely and condemning it as, not spiritually sound or true, because there's a purpose for everything, even if we don't necessarily benefit from it 100% at a soul level. We're still working through that for a reason at soul level, and that's kind of what humanity is doing with these systems and structures. It's part of the evolution process. So yeah, it's important for Arcturians to kind of take a step back, but at the same time to accept those social structures, but not internalize them. So kind of just saying, yes, this is what it is right now. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand why it's in place, and I understand that it is slowly shifting, and me embodying my soul wisdom, sharing my insight, and being in my highest alignment as an Arcturian, if you resonate as an Arcturian and you're listening to this, is to really just stand in that power and express that level of your soul authenticity, because that's the greatest thing you can do to shift these social structures that you don't resonate with. You don't necessarily have to participate in them 100%. You don't have to throw yourselves into them and try and understand it. You can sort of find that middle ground for yourself. And it may feel like being a little bit on the fence, but I feel like that's a little bit healthier for Arcturians in most cases than completely ostracizing yourself from society and, either internally rebelling against these things or externally making it known that you don't agree with this and you won't participate in it. So it's shifting it from the inside out, which does mean that there does need to be a certain level of participation with it, but you can come with that energy of alignment and help shift the system from the inside out. So I hope that makes sense. So that's pretty much it for Arcturians, other than the fact that I haven't mentioned physical traits and characteristics of some of the Starseed origin groups, and I've noticed that in my own listening to my own readings and my own videos here. And the Arcturians actually are one of the soul groups that when they incarnate into physical human incarnations, they tend to be quite visible as Arcturians. Like I can look at somebody and say, oh, they've got Arcturian origin, or they've been an Arcturian. And it's simply by looking at their facial structure and often their body structure. So this is not going to be like across the board, every single Arcturian looks like this. Again, there's many different variations, but I have noticed a few physical traits that really just scream Arcturian. They tend to be not extra tall, not abnormally tall, but just somewhat tall and lithe, very sort of slim bodies with a long sort of oval shaped face, tending to have almost very pronounced cheekbones or very pronounced like bone structure in the face. And if you look at the pictures of the Arcturians I was showing before in their soul format, in their actual soul group, bodies, you can see sometimes how that crossover might take place. There's some similarities there. So yeah, just that's kind of subjective and that's just from my own experience, but I have noticed those similarities and qualities and traits. So yeah, I hope that this helped you guys to get a better understanding of the Arcturians, of yourself as an Arcturian, and some of some of the traits and qualities that you may find yourself expressing as an Arcturian. So for Arcturians, it's really great to connect to your spirituality in whatever way really resonates for you. Share that insight, share that wisdom, be that beacon for others. You can be a guide and a wonderful advisor. So, if that resonates with you, then go for it. You'll be great at it. All right. So if you have any other questions about Arcturians, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And if you're curious about finding out what your soul group of origin is, as well as who you are at soul level, how you work with energy, and any blocks and restrictions that may be limiting your divine expression within this human incarnation, then please reach out to me at services.ToKittyandBeyond@gmail.com to book an Akashic Record soul realignment reading. All of the additional information on the readings I provide and other services and offerings I have available, you can check out the description box below this video for a full comprehensive list with pricing and descriptions for all of my services. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I love connecting with you, and we will see you in the next episode of Starseed Origins. Bye.